Hello, everyone, and welcome to another 30 for 30. That's right, 30 episodes of Set Listing Bruce, 30 Days of Springsteen, every day in November, a new podcast, each one discussing a Bruce Springsteen release, or for us old folks, albums. Joining me tonight is my friend Scott Colby. Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yeah, so before we get to your album, let's talk a little bit about yourself.
I am a journalist. I'm a writer. I'm an editor. I live in Toronto, and I'm a father of twins. They're 12, and I'm a husband. And yeah, that's the basics right there. And I'm obviously a big Springsteen fan.
So, talk to me. First off, tell us the album you want to discuss,
Right,
and then share why you're
right.
wanting to pick
Okay.
that one.
All right. I'm pretty excited about this. So the
Okay,
album I want to discuss is oh, Springsteen on Broadway.
nice.
And the reason I want to discuss it is we all have our Springsteen moments, right?
Yes.
First shows and whatnot. For me, my first show was 85, Born in the USA tour in Toronto at Exhibition Stadium, 100,000 people or something, massive, right? It was right at the peak of his pop culture fame, right? Fantastic. There's been other shows, but Springsteen on Broadway for me is I've only seen the boss um, like in Ontario or in Michigan or in Buffalo, right?
Okay.
I'm not one of those guys that's going to travel all over the place. If he comes to me, I'll go see him, and I'll travel down to Detroit and I'll travel over to Buffalo. So when Springsteen on Broadway came up, right? Of course, that's in New York City, which is Buffalo's in New York State. Buffalo's 90 minutes away. New York's a little longer, right?
Sure.
And I first venue was 100,000 people or something, right? And then the arena's 20,000 people. And I've always wished I could see him in a small venue. I never got to see him in the Tom Joad tour because I was living in a place where it wasn't close to any concerts and it wasn't a big concert. Anyway, Springsteen on Broadway comes out and I'm thinking, oh, that would be really cool, right? My dream had always been a small venue, right? I thought maybe if I live long enough and Bruce is 90 years old and no one wants to hear him, I'll go see him somewhere. I never thought his popularity isn't waning at all, right? Anyway, Springsteen on Broadway comes up. That would be super cool, right? I signed up for the tickets. If people don't know, you had to register with Ticketmaster, and then there was a drape. So it was completely random. Obviously, small theater, short run, limited tickets, hope for the best. So the first batch of tickets came available, and I wasn't part of that. I didn't get it. Then they opened up a second batch, and
Right.
I was driving my car. We had friends. My wife's best friend, she's from Toronto, but she lives in Chicago. They were visiting, and we were driving from Toronto to Niagara Falls, and I get my phone's pinging, and it's, hey, there's messages. Tickets are available. So I'm driving for an hour. I get to Niagara Falls. I'm literally standing beside Niagara Falls with the mist of the falls on my phone. I'm trying to get tickets. It's just not working. We have friends visiting. I said, okay, this isn't going to happen. And I'm not the kind of guy who will go and spend money on scalpers tickets, right?
Okay.
I thought, okay, this isn't going to, of course, you can always go down and you can spend whatever you want and, get tickets, right? Plus, I have a wife and kids and family priorities and whatnot. And one day at work, I get a text message saying, this is, I don't know, 6 months later or something. They extended the show and I got on and I'm looking for tickets and I'm trying to get the cheaper tickets because these tickets are not cheap, right?
No.
They're quite expensive compared to a normal show for face value, right? I finally, after trying dates and everything, I finally find two. I couldn't get any of the cheaper range. I had to go to the higher range. And
And
there were
if
two,
I remember correct, there were
yeah,
three ranges,
there
right?
were three
Like,
ranges. Yeah, yeah. So I got the middle range and there were two seats in the front row of the balcony right in front of Bruce.
yeah.
So I called my wife up and she says, if you really want to go, I said, this is like a once in a lifetime thing for me. So I bought the tickets, two tickets, and they were $1,400 for the two tickets, American. So in Canada, that's significantly, they were $1,000 each.
Yeah.
And once you get the exchange rate. And my brother, my oldest brother, I have two brothers. One brother lived in New Jersey at the time, an hour outside New York City. So I knew I could go down. Maybe he'd want to go. But I also tried my brother Craig. And so he talked to his wife and we decided, okay, we're going to go down. Brothers, road trip, rented a car. I always drive old model cars. This was a new car. It was a Chrysler 300. It had Apple Play. It had Sirius SM. We listened to Springsteen concerts all the way down. We stopped at the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown on the way down from Toronto. Got to our brother's place, and then we took the train in, spent all day, went to the museums, and then went for dinner, and then went and saw the show. So already, like I said, a pretty amazing trip, right? And we haven't even seen Springsteen yet, right? So we get to our seats, and we are literally in the front of the balcony and looking down at the stage. And I just remember thinking, this is so awesome to be in New York, to be on Broadway, to see this him in this small venue. Of course, the reviews were fantastic. He comes out and plays his first song, which was, oh God, I should know this. I've been listening to it all day today.
Growing up.
Growing up, yeah, growing up. He gives his little talk, and I remember just thinking, this is the best experience ever. I've probably seen Springsteen, I don't know, maybe 20 times in different venues. I've seen him at Darien Lake, which is like an outdoor amusement park, a little more intimate. But anyway, for me, this is the best. This is the best. You can actually hear his voice without amplification, right? Like that's how close he is, right? And when he started talking about Elvis, right, he's talking about how, if people remember, Elvis, when he was a boy, he was 7 years old, and he saw him on the Ed Sullivan Show. He never even mentions Elvis's name, right? What's Elvis? And how it caused a revolution, and how that spoke to him, and he wanted to be Elvis. He needed the guitar to do this stuff, right? So I'm a journalist, I'm a writer. At this point, I'd written one book. It had become a national bestseller here in Canada. And when it came on for sale at the local Costco, my book was for sale right beside Springsteen's Born to Run.
Nice.
Yeah, I kind of get it. That was just the coolest experience of my life, right? And of course, Springsteen on Broadway is based on the book, right? Reading the book, which I loved, of course, it was so worth the wait for him to write his memoir.
Yeah.
Reading the book, it didn't inspire me to want to write. I've always wanted to write, but when he was talking about Elvis and how Elvis inspired him, and he needed a guitar, right? He needed this prop to be someone. And as he was telling his story, it was like a lightning bolt hit me. And I said to myself, Bruce is telling me right now that I need to tell my story, right? Everyone in this room needs to tell their story. And I made a vow that's what I was going to do. I was going to start writing more books and personal books and writing fiction and things like that. And so that in a nutshell,
That's okay.
that's the reason why for me this album is so special to me, because it was almost like, I don't want to get too dramatic, but it was almost like an epiphany. Just being there, hearing him, just his guitar in the theater, and his black shirt and his black jeans, nothing else, stripped down. This is my hero. Look, I'm not a musician. I can't sing. I don't play guitar, but I do write. And this was about writing. The book was about writing. The show was about writing. It was just so powerful, and he did it so well that I came away from that show really inspired. And one of the things I did, we went outside the theater afterwards, and they were selling merch. And I bought this Springsteen on Broadway coffee mug. I bought two of them.
Yeah.
And this is what I get up in the morning to write at 5 a.m. before the kids wake up. And that's what I drink my tea out of while I'm writing. And Bruce is with me every step of the way.
So I love that introduction. A couple of questions that, by the way, Craig was so excited you're going to join me. So I will share my,
Mhm.
I, there was a lot of angst about Broadway, and there was a lot of jealousy about people getting to go multiple times, right?
Right.
All the ugliness of social media.
Yeah.
And I made a point that some of you who are complaining about people going to Broadway multiple times have no problem about being in the front of the queue, on the front of the stage, in the pit every show.
Right.
And I don't see you volunteering to not have elbows on the stage so that someone else would get that experience. It's a totally different Jesse. And I'm like, I don't see it is.
Yeah.
So I had said, look, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to get against the go. And I have no resentment to anyone. If they can go more than one time, let them go. Someone sent me a DM and said, why aren't you going? I said, because I can't get a ticket. right?
Yeah.
And he says, I can get you a ticket. How
Mhm.
much are you willing to pay? And once again, it was the middle range.
Yeah.
So here's my story. You mentioned your lovely bride.
Mhm.
So I went to my wife, Linda, and I said, I'm going to ask you a question, and it is really important for you to know that you don't have to say yes. And she's looking at me. I'm like, we've been married a long time.
Yeah.
And there are certain questions where you have to say yes. For
Yeah.
example, if you say, hey, my sister Mary's coming over Friday night and going to spend the night, you don't care, do you? The answer is no, of course I don't care.
You gotta say yes to the family.
So someone has given me a chance to go see Bruce on Broadway. Wow. How much is it? So I told her, wow, that is a once in a lifetime thing, though. Just how much is it going to cost you to fly to New York? I don't know. So she gets on the computer and she says, okay, I found on Expedia or somewhere, she goes, I've got you a direct flight from Dallas to New York, and they've thrown in a hotel at one of these little pod hotels that basically looks like a cabin in a cruise ship. We can get it all under a grand. And yes, this is your Christmas present. This is your birthday present. Go. And so I had the same feeling you did. I was so thrilled. I flew in. I got to have dinner with Bella Pori, who's been on the podcast multiple times. And so she met me, and that was almost as fun as seeing Bruce.
Right.
I was
Yeah.
just
I
thrilled.
got I got my Detroit Tiger shirt on, by the
Yes, there you go.
way.
And I'm sitting there in the venue, and I was on the bottom. And if this is the stage, I'm the left toward this edge, right?
Yeah.
And I looked around and I said, none of us are going to talk, are we? and and the guy said, I may cry, but I promise you there will be no talking. It was amazing when he gets off mic and starts talking and you can hear him, you're like, holy crap, I can't believe I'm doing this.
Mhm.
So that's my experience to get to go.
Yeah. Oh
Yes.
wow, that's great. So both of us didn't think we'd get a chance.
Yeah.
It happened for us. Yeah.
Did you know what the set list was going to be when you went in?
I might. Yeah. I think I did. I looked it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked up what the set list was going to be, and I'd read enough reviews
Yeah.
that I had an idea of, and I'd read the book, of course, and I knew it was based on the book. I remember thinking that none of the stories were. There were a few, but none of them were really new to me. But obviously, it's so much more powerful when you hear him in his voice, and of course, he's such a good performer, even without singing. Right, his timing, the dramatic way he can speak, and the humor. Right,
Yeah.
like the stuff about making it all up. Like I read it in the book, but hearing him talk about it was hilarious. And of
Yeah.
course the drama and then bringing his wife out
Yeah.
and playing the piano for a couple of songs. So I had an idea of
Hmm.
what the lineup was, but I really had no idea what the emotional impact, the artistic impact was going to be. And it overwhelmed me. Like I remember sitting in that chair thinking, like, this is the best, the
Yeah.
best. Like, I love every minute of this. I love everything about this experience. And I've been at concerts and it's like, this is fun,
Yeah.
you know, but just that Springsteen on Broadway. So that's the show.
Yeah.
And the album, I think, does a pretty excellent job of recreating that experience.
I agree. So we're we aren't going to go song by song, but I thought we'd go through, were there songs that surprised you how much you enjoyed them?
Hmm. It's the way he sets up the stories, right? All of them had more of an impact than I expected
Yes.
because he sets them up, right? Of course, I love growing up. My Hometown isn't particularly one of my favorite songs of his. My Father's House was very poetic, and The Wish was very poetic. And my favorite song of all is Thunder Road. So the way he set that up too, I would say that those ones in particular, but there wasn't one that just said, yeah, long time coming.
Okay.
Long Time Coming is one of my favorite songs of his that isn't a big hit. And it's about a beautiful song about someone whose wife or girlfriend becomes pregnant.
Yeah.
And he set that all up talking about his relationship with his dad,
Yes.
which I have a fantastic relationship with my dad. So I don't
Right.
have daddy issues. And Bruce has always talked about how all rock stars are out there just screaming daddy, right? They have
Yeah.
daddy issues.
You're right.
And so that one, just that father son, his wife was pregnant with their first child, and his dad drove 500 miles to see him and didn't announce it, and basically said, "You've been very good to us, Bruce, but I wasn't always good to you." And it was his apology. And so that, and then it went into a song which I think is an underrated song. So that would, I put that one at the top of my list of a story and song that was very impactful that I wasn't expecting.
So I had a couple. Um, I am not a fan of the blues version of Born in the USA,
Yeah, I'm
like
with you
on
on that one.
tracks. I just didn't care for that.
Yeah,
And I was really surprised that he did Dancing in the Dark. When I looked at it, like, that seems weird.
yeah,
I'm there, and he tells this wonderful story about, going to the draft and talking about this and how when he gets home, his father, who had always said, wait till the army gets you, wait till the army gets you, when he says he's not going to go, and his dad says, that's good,
hmm,
right?
yeah,
And goes into Born in the USA. I go, I need to shut the F up because obviously he knows what he's doing,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then when I'm sitting there and he starts talking, he's doing Long Walk Home and The Rising, and he's talking about the country and worried. And he says, and then what we have to do is do like our mother did, my mother did. Put on your shoes. And he starts dancing in the dark and
yeah,
going to Land of Hope and Dreams. I was back in tears. I was just because Land of Hope and Dreams is definitely in my top three Springsteen songs. On any given day, it would be number one. And to
really.
have that combo was absolutely beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah. Thoughts on The Wish?
Yeah, yeah, that's a song that's not, has he ever, was that on tracks? It
It
was,
was on
wasn't it?
tracks. Yes.
Yeah, just beautiful.
Yeah.
Just
I
so touching.
It was, and I saw it early. So was not talking about his mother having Alzheimer at the time.
Yeah,
And later he did, right? And he
he did.
shared
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, he did when I was there.
Yeah. So my story, Scott, is that I was listening to The Wish one day in the car, and it struck me that I'm lucky I still have my mom. And so I was going to call her, and I did. And I'm trying to explain to her about the song and how it meant and how I was really grateful she was there. And she's, what are you talking about, Jesse Wayne? What song? I don't understand. Don't worry about mom. How are you doing? So I have lost my mom now, but I
Sorry to hear
think
that.
of that when I hear The Wish, I think of
Yeah,
that. Just she's not understanding it, and I'm just trying to share with it.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, my mom has dementia right now.
uh-huh.
Not Alzheimer's, it's a different form of dementia. She
Yeah,
knows who we are. She's in long-term care, and she's in a wheelchair, and she's not really speaking much anymore. So yeah, at the
yeah,
time of the concert, it had been like 7 years.
yeah.
Yeah,
And we just lost her. I don't know if you've gotten to see the Road Diary
I haven't
that's
seen
on
it yet.
Hulu.
So
Okay.
yeah,
I
I'm going to
won't
see it
spoil
soon.
anything away for it. Um, so yeah, I think, yeah, I think 10th Avenue Freeze Out talking about the 1 + 1 = 3
That
and
was
the
fun.
magic of the band was really good of talking about, and he explores those themes in Letter to You more too, that
Yes.
thing about a thing.
Last one
So
standing. So
yes.
He talks about the guy in the band who died, uh, last one standing, who was the drummer in the band. Yeah, those themes were there,
And
definitely.
and when he says, "I wonder who went in my place," and goes
Yes,
into Born in the USA,
that was really powerful. And he talked about meeting the author of Born on the Fourth of July,
right?
um, in the hotel in LA, and he brought him to meet all these veterans. And he had just read the book. He read the book on the drive out west, and then he ends up being at the same hotel as him.
Yes.
And I grew up in Canada, but when I was 18, I was visiting my cousins who lived in Fort Worth,
Okay.
and I had to go register for the draft at that time because Ronald Reagan had instituted you had to register at least. I just am so grateful that I grew up in a time when I didn't have to worry about a decision like that. And so I can't even imagine what it must have been like for him and his friends. If people don't know, he didn't have to go because he had a bum knee from a motorcycle accident,
Right.
right? And when he said someone went in my place, that was powerful.
It was really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a little when he came back after the pandemic and they did another round of this and he changed around a little bit. I would love to hear the couple of new songs from that.
Yeah.
Instead of Born to Run, he did I'll See You in My Dreams. I think he's got one other song from Letter to You. I would have to look it up.
Right.
Yeah. I were was Patty there the night you were?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. She came out.
Yeah.
That was really
A-
nice too.
And I was really happy that it was on Netflix. It's
Yes.
been I probably watch it once a year.
Okay.
Yeah, just enjoying it. My son really loved it and immediately loved growing up. He just thought and
I
I
love
think
that
that
song.
yeah, exactly
Yeah.
right. Any other thoughts you want to share on the night? I guess you and Craig going, and then it
Yeah.
sounds like a great weekend in New York.
Well, it was. And then Craig had to get back. I can't remember why.
Okay.
So he flew back home the next day. So it was a Friday night. I believe our tickets were on a Friday night. Yeah.
Okay.
Friday, October 12th, 2018.
Hmm.
And he flew back, and I stayed in New Jersey with my brother and his wife. And I can't even remember what we did. But it was just nice because I had young kids at the time. They were 6 years old. My twins were six. And just to be away and have a day and not have to worry about that was nice. And then the drive back. So I think it's 8 hour drive back to Toronto. And because I had the XM satellite radio, right, I
Right.
listened to Spring. I drove back. It was a beautiful November day, sunny, warm, and I listened to concerts all the way back. And it was just so much. It just reinforced the whole having this whole Bruce experience. And after the show, we stood outside and we watched him get in his limo and we waved at him and Patty. And I'm not the kind of person that's going to go stand in line and try and get an autograph. And
Yeah.
he wasn't doing that at the time. But yeah, just having that experience. And New York was such a huge part of his experience growing up. I always love origin stories. I'm not a big Marvel guy, whatever, but the origin stories are always the best stories in any kind of series, right?
Yeah.
So the things that really like the first disc of On Broadway is what I like those stories the best. I love the stories. And then being in New York, and because that's he grew up in Jersey, and I've been to the Jersey Shore because my brother lives near there, and I've been down to Asbury Park, and I've been to the Stone Pony and the boardwalk. So I've seen those areas, and then to be in New York and know that's where he had so many great shows, and he really made it like that. I found that very powerful, and I can't remember if it was in the Broadway show, but it was in the book, right? And
Hmm.
to me it was fascinating how he had a singular mind about becoming a musician, right? That was it. He said he and the
Yeah.
band, there was no plan B.
Right.
The record companies weren't interested in him, but they just kept going because there was no other option, right?
Yeah.
And that comes through when they were driving to do a New Year's Eve show in
Right.
Big California, and they drove across the country, and he got separated from Danny Federici, and he was
Yeah.
with a guy, and Bruce had never driven a car before. He was 21 years old. He'd never driven a car,
Yeah.
and they lost them in Nashville. I guess they're taking Route 66
Yeah.
across the country, and so the guy had to start the car and then switch seats because he couldn't drive standard. And that's those stories, like just that, like the lengths that he would go to make it. Like that's what
Yeah.
it takes. And I think that's a message to me, like that's such a powerful message that if you have a dream, he doesn't sugarcoat it, right? Like you have to give it everything. There's no excuse.
Right.
Don't let anything stand in your way. And some people can fall back on something else, right?
Right.
But with Bruce, when he mentioned the night that he moved out of Freehold down to Asbury Park, and his mom and dad had moved to California with his younger sister. His older sister was already pregnant and married and
Yeah.
living in South Jersey. So he was all alone, right? And they were moving out of town in the back of a pickup truck, and the cops pulled him over because you're not allowed to move at night, you
Yes.
know. And anyway, they let him go. And just that sense, I don't think people understand that here was this young man who basically was on his own. And all he had was his guitar and his music and his vision and his passion. And he'd never had an honest job. There's a funny line where he says, I've never worked 5 days a week in my life until now, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I did like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
One of the
story,
things
that
that
storytelling to me really just resonates. So
and it
yes.
was very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah. And the one thing that also about the show that kind of surprised me was at the end, he ended with the Lord's Prayer.
yes.
And I thought that was odd
Yeah.
because he's always rejected the oppression of religion. He obviously has a lot of religious symbols in his music and themes. And he talked about being stuffed in a garbage can by a nun when he was a kid and how
Yeah.
oppressive the church was. And now here he is, he's become a man of faith. And that was interesting.
I agree.
Yeah.
Before I let you go though, tell me about the book.
Yes. The book that I've written.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I've written 3 books. The first one was a memoir I wrote with an NHL hockey dad. There was a guy named PK Subban. He played for the Montreal Canadiens and he played for the Nashville Predators. And his dad was a friend of mine. He's a Jamaican immigrant. Then he moved to Canada as a young man, as a boy. And it's a story. He raised 3 kids who became professional hockey players and 2 daughters who became teachers. And the theme of the book is about how to develop the potential of any child. That became a national bestseller. That happened at the same time that Born to Run came out. But then I wrote a collection of short stories. But the third book I wrote is a book. It's a book on writing. It's a writing guide. It's called That's What You Think. And that book, because I'm a writer, I teach people how to write opinion pieces and how to write op-eds and short memoirs. And I used a lot of my own stories in them as examples of, and there's a lot of memoir. And I quote Bruce in it too. And one of the things that I quote Bruce on is, I hope I'm allowed to quote him. It was on a radio interview he did up here in Canada with CBC Radio. And he was talking about how long it takes him to make his albums. Right.
Yeah.
It took him 6 months to write Born to Run, one single, like the single, right? Kept rewriting and everything. Like,
Yeah.
Anyway, he got a little better. But anyone I think who creates, you put your heart and soul into it, and then there comes a time when it's time to you want to release it. And it's not always clear when that time is, right? And
Right.
so he said he's never understood musicians who said, oh, I got to get my album out by November. I got to get it out by Christmas, or I got to get it out by the spring, right? For him, it's like you do the best you can, but it has to be your best, right? And this line really struck me. He said, nobody cares how long it took you to make a lousy album.
Yes.
And so anyway, that is like one of the messages that I have, because when I coach, I'm a writing coach. When I coach people, I say, you can't be perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. But Bruce, we all know he's like the last couple of albums, he's produced albums and then just never released them because he went back and said, this isn't my best work.
Yeah.
So that is the book that's out now. And I also wrote a novel, a murder mystery set in I grew my brother Craig and my brother Jim, we all grew up in a town called Thunder Bay, which is on the northern shore of Lake Superior. It's a 40-minute drive from the Minnesota border. And it's a very frontier town surrounded by wilderness. And I wrote that's a coming of age story of a young man. And it's the exact time that I became a Springsteen fan when I was 19 years old, 1985. And I became a fan in 84 when I was studying for my high school exams. And
Yeah.
Born in the USA came out and they played it on the radio. And so anyway, those 2 books, the novel won't come out till next year or the year after. But definitely Springsteen and On Broadway inspired me to write both those books. And I wrote them with Bruce inspiring me. So thank you for asking about those.
And if someone wants to get more information, where can they go?
I go to my website, It's coachcolby.me.
Okay.
So I'm Scott Colby, Colby. So Coach Colby is my website, coachcolby.me. And
Okay.
there's some information in there. And you can buy my book and you can learn about how I try and help writers. Just Bruce try to help other musicians. And yeah, thank you.
So Scott, you're welcome to take a pass on this if you don't, but as we're recording this, it's Halloween night.
Yes,
We are close to the election, and there's
yes,
been a little brouhaha about the Washington Post not recommending a
yeah,
presidential candidate. As
yeah,
someone who does an op-eds page, any
yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. That's a good question. I think it's a mistake. I do. Editorials. So I've written some editorials, right? What I do is I assign and I edit op-eds, right? An op-ed is an opinion piece that's opposite the editorial page. That's all it really is. The New
Okay.
York Times invented it in 1971, but it's just opinion pieces. Editorial pages are funny things. I've written editorials and you're writing something that represents the paper. Like,
Right.
how do you represent the paper, right? You're just a small group of people who, but our paper, the Toronto Star, is a progressive newspaper and everyone knows that, right? But we try and say, I think that you need to take a stand. I think people need to take a stand and not be on the sidelines. What I try and teach is people how to write persuasively, but also fairly. Let's have an open debate about topics. Let's not call each other names. Let's not talk down to people. Let's not belittle people. Let's treat people with respect. And that is the way that we come to understand each other. And I think that we have way more in common than we have not in common, right? In
Yes.
society. And that is like my main message is let's find the common ground and let's discuss things. Let's not belittle people. Let's not, whichever side you're on. That's my mission. So I think an editorial, if you want to endorse a candidate, I think it's just a good way to continue that debate.
Yeah.
And you don't have to agree. That's the beauty of it. And the editorial has to be written in such a way that says we support X candidate for these reasons, right? But you feel free to disagree and feel free to vote for someone else. We're not saying that you're wrong for voting for the other person, but let's just have that debate. I think that for me, if the Washington Post and the LA Times, they both decided not to endorse a candidate. And what just feels a little funny to me is they decided it like a week, 2 weeks before the election, right?
Right.
This is an editorial stance that you're going to make for your paper. We're no longer going to endorse candidates for a philosophical reason. Fine. I just find it's funny that it's so close to the election.
The timing does seem a little strange, right?
To make a big decision like that,
Yeah.
both owners are billionaires of the Washington Post and the LA Times. Most newspapers that are owned by billionaires tend to be lean more towards the right. That's just so. And I just think that there could have been a better process and a better timing. And I know the
Yeah.
people like the editorial page editors who work in those departments were blindsided by it. But at the end of the day, I don't think that they are that persuasive. I don't think we endorse candidates who lose all the time.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, are we really changing people's minds?
Yeah.
Do change people's minds. But like I said,
Yeah.
let's just have a debate.
Yeah. Said. This was so much fun, Scott. Thank you so much. I'd love to get you and Craig on together sometime and just
Yeah,
swap stories. That'd be great. You want to answer the mayor question?
I don't even know what that is.
No, I end every podcast when I have a guest that Jay Armstrong was an honors English teacher. He's now retired. But when he would teach, he would give his students the lyrics
Okay,
and they would discuss it as if it was a poem. And
okay,
then he would ask his class, does Mary get in the car? So
yes,
that is your
right.
question.
Yes, she gets in. She definitely gets in the car.
Why?
100%. Yeah, because I think that it's a song of hope, right? He's there to get her to go somewhere, and if she doesn't get in, really, there's no point in the song, right?
Yeah.
He's
Yep.
going to
There.
take her away, and they're going to go off, and they're going to live their life. I went and looked at the lyrics again really closely, and really thought hard about it. And to me, it was she always did. I didn't even think it was a choice not to.
But
Yeah.
about half my listeners, half my guests say no, she doesn't. And they always have some interesting thoughts. So that's very great.
Did
Sure.
you see Bruce? I think it was on Stephen Colbert where he talked about the lyrics.
Yes, about
Does the
yeah.
Mary's dress wave or does Mary's dress sway?
Swaves, yes.
Yeah, it was either on Kim. It was either on the Tonight Show or on the Late Show. I can't remember.
Yeah. I
But
think it was with Colbert. And
yeah, and
he
he's
said it
singing
was
it wrong.
Yeah, I did love that. And I actually have a t-shirt on my website. The question isn't if it sways or waves, it's does she get in
Okay.
the car?
Yeah,
That's
yeah. But
great.
imagine if she didn't, and he's just
Yeah.
sitting there and he's dreaming all these things. We're pulling out of here to win, but oh, she stayed behind. So now I'm going to
Yeah.
go to the
Um,
drive-through, and
one of my
you know,
favorite answers was a guy said that if it's the band playing it, she gets in the car. If it's him solo, she doesn't. And
ah,
if you listen to it solo, he sounds a little sad.
first song.
Yeah. Warren Zane, who wrote the Deliver Me from Nowhere, the book on Nebraska,
Yeah,
he had an interesting, he said that this is all in the singer's mind, that he's really not talking to Mary. He said and he mentioned someone that he went to high school with. So I'm just going to use Carol. It's like I asked Carol Ann out 1,000 times and I never even spoke to her. So his mind is that he's not even, this is a vision of him. He says that he's too afraid to talk to her. So it always makes for a fun discussion to end the
yeah.
episode.
I can.
So
All of those are plausible.
yeah,
All those are plausible.
absolutely.
Yeah,
All right, coachcolby.me is
yeah.
where you can get more information. Check out the books, check out
Correct.
his work. I'd love this. Thank you so much
For having
for
me on.
joining me. Yeah, and let's maybe in the new year, let's get you and Craig on. That'd be fun.
Yeah, yeah. Bruce is in Canada right now. He's in Montreal, and we're going to see him Sunday night. I'm taking my kids to see their first concert, and we're going to see Bruce Springsteen
Awesome.
this Sunday.
Well, have a
Yep,
blast. You're going to have
yep.
fun.
Phone because of his peptic ulcer.
Right.
So this is a year later. So we've been waiting a year for Bruce to come back.
Have fun. Have a blast time. Bruce, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Listeners, thank you so much for listening. Remember, I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter, aka X. The show does have a Patreon page, which set listing Bruce on Patreon, where you can support the show for as little as $1 a month. Thank you, Scott. Thank you,
Thank you.
listeners. Remember to be safe, be kind. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.